What up, Simply Cyber community? How are you guys? Welcome back, Erika.
Everybody.
Another great episode. I'm really looking forward to this one.
Special one, special episode, special guest.
I know. I even told you I had to do his intro because big fan, dear friend. Many of you all should know him actually, so you're not going to be too surprised, but we're going to have some meaty conversations today. So who do we have on the show? We have Neal Bridges on the show today. If you guys don't know Neal, you need to know Neal. He is literally a cybersecurity powerhouse. He brings over 2 decades of cybersecurity experience to this field, and currently he's in a coveted role known as a Chief Information Security Officer, also called a CISO, at a company and a startup called Query.ai, where he is responsible for leading the company's security strategy and operations and guiding product development efforts to help customers achieve their desired security outcomes. So we're going to be digging into what that means, but more about Neal. He is an avid mentor and leader in the cybersecurity space. He has experience spanning all the way in the federal space to commercial organizations. He has also helped build teams at multiple Fortune 100 companies. He's also successfully led go-to-market strategies, and he has spearheaded multi-million-dollar mergers and acquisition activities. Guys, freaking, like I said, Erika, a powerhouse. You guys may also know him for founding one of my other favorite YouTube channels called Cybersecurity. He has many different shows over there. Go check that out. Hit subscribe. I don't know if I can say that, Jerry, to another YouTube channel. I'm pretty sure we're safe here, Erika, but dropping all the love for Neal. So without further ado, let's bring him on the stage.
I'm pretty sure y'all got the wrong guess. That does not sound like me at all.
That's Mr. Awesome.
Yeah, Mr. Awesome. So, Neal, it's been 3 years since we've had you on the show.
Yeah, it's
Repeat
been a minute.
offender.
I missed you both.
Oh, I know, right? Oh, it's so fun hanging out with the two cyber chicks.
It is. It really is.
Was
The
our
last
name?
time I saw you, you were up in bed, laid up pretty.
Oh, that's right.
Recovering from surgery. Yup.
Yeah. So
it
glad
was
to see you're
Hackers
doing
and
well.
Hexen. That was when John was still on here. Oh,
Yeah.
man.
Throwback for
Wow.
those OG listeners out there.
Right. Wow.
Well, we're so pumped to have you. Jax and I have been hyping this episode up for like a while now. We get to have a lot of fun today, have some really cool conversations, and then something that I love about having you on the show is like anything is a relevant topic. It's like whatever you want to throw on the agenda, like it's cool. Let's chat about it. So appreciate
anything,
it.
you know me, I'm an open book and I got lots of opinions. So what do you want me to hit you with?
I mean, let's talk about your position. You're a CISO. That's creme de la creme. There's so many people in this industry that they get started, their career path, they're like, the ultimate goal is to be the CISO. So, I want to unpack that. So I want to unpack that. What does a typical day look like for you? What's the biggest challenges? What do you enjoy the most? Let's kind of demystify and unpack a little bit what the CISO role is.
Yeah, and I have to say that mine's a little different because I'm a CISO at a startup, and that's been I knew it was going to be challenging when I took the role. So I had been deputy CISO for larger Fortune 100 companies, Abbott, Mondelez, companies like that. This is the first time left seat versus right seat type of thing, and then to do it on top of a startup posed a ton of challenges for me. Notwithstanding the fact that the buck for literally everything stops with me: technology, operations, security, privacy, risk. I am the epitome of a security team in a box. This is my box. This is the Neal box, and there's a whole security team right here. And it's been and then on top of that, just trying to support, a startup doing startup-y things, which is like trying to gain market traction and trying to get a message out, especially in a space where, there's not a Gartner quadrant for it, right? There's not a, there's a lot of like new things that we're having to educate the marketplace on, and lots of new concepts and lots of innovation that we're doing. These are problems that haven't been solved in the past. And so it's been, it has been, to say it's been stressful is probably like a huge, massive understatement. But at the same time, like it's exciting, right? There's when I was at Abbott, and I'm pretty open about a lot of this, right? Like I take on a lot of transformation projects, right? And Jax is probably tired of hearing me say transformation quite a bit, because it seems to be like the kind of like the Neal buzzword is transformation. But like I love coming into orgs that are broken. I love coming into orgs that have nothing. I love coming into scenarios where they are just like, hey, we need a change. We need you to shake it up. And if you look at the transformations I've done at Abbott, if you look at it, I came in, they didn't have a CISO. They had just hired their first CISO in 2016. And they were like, Neal, we need you to build an entire security operations organization from scratch. Didn't have one, built it from scratch. Coming to Mondelez post WannaCry, and they're like, hey, we obviously messed up WannaCry pretty bad. We're, having to do a lawsuit with Zurich. We need a transformation, of our security org post WannaCry, right? Coming in and doing that, right? And then obviously coming in with a startup and having to say like, hey, we want to go to market with a security tool. We obviously know that we need to take cybersecurity seriously, being in the cybersecurity space. So we need a CISO who can not just solidify that we take security seriously, but also can implement, execute, and run an entire security organization from end to end. And so I like those transformation type of projects. I think that that's unique to me and unique to kind of the opportunities that I seek out. Not every CISO gets what I call the privilege to really do a transformation project like that. Those CISOs that I've had that have been my mentors, they've usually come into established organizations and taken on somebody else's program and really tried to figure out how they make their mark in that program. And that's a typical CISO track. And so I love it. There's a lot to it. There's definitely a lot to unpack about the role. Um, there's part of me that's like, would I ever go back to an Abbott or a Mondelez as a CISO, type of individual? And I just know that the challenges that exist in a big organization like that are vastly different than the challenges that exist for me in a startup.
For those that are listening and are curious about the CISO track, is this something that you feel like you prepared for, like throughout your entire career? Like, did you have this goal in mind, or did you have really critical roles that kind of came together to give you the experience that you needed to be a CISO? Kind of like help to unpack a little bit on what best prepared you for a role like this, because it sounds like a huge challenge.
Yeah, no, for sure. So I got out of the military in 2013, and I definitely had a little bit of a chip on my shoulder on the cybersecurity industry, and I was like, I don't understand how these companies keep getting breached. I don't understand like why it's so hard. Like, patch your stuff. Like, don't click on phishing emails. Like, have good passwords, right? Multi-factor, like all that stuff. Like when I came out in 2013. And when I came out, when I was looking for my job, leaving the military, I was like, I'm going to go be a CISO. And I think when I got out and I started to look at what was happening in the private sector versus what was happening in the military, I realized that like there's a lot more to unpack about, private sector cybersecurity than there was in the military. And so I decided actively to stick to my roots, which was hacking and pen testing. And I went and worked and built, pen testing orgs for, companies like Fidelity. And, I built a $10 million, pen testing practice out of an MSP out of Ann Arbor. And a lot of that was really just kind of geared towards like, okay, I know that I wanted to be a CISO when I came out. I know that I need to get to the roles that I need to be a successful CISO. And so I tried to be really strategic, and I can actually go through and I can actually tell you the strategic decisions I made in each of the roles that I took between the time I left the military in 2013 until the time I took the role at Query. And it was very much like, it was tactical. I wanted to stick to my roots. I wanted to be comfortable. And so my first job was getting a pen testing role for Fidelity and building and running the pen testing team at Fidelity. I knew leaving that I needed to start getting some business experience, right? And so I sought out in my job search roles that would allow me to get more business experience. And so I stumbled across an MSP that was looking to build a pen testing practice. And I was like, sweet, I'm comfortable with pen testing. Let's try to build a pen testing practice. I reported directly to the president. I'm going to get some business experience building a pen testing practice for an MSP. We were successful. We built a multi-million-dollar pen testing practice. PwC reached out to me and they were like, hey, we saw what you've been doing. You're a SANS instructor. I've been a SANS instructor for I think 3 or 4 years at the time. They're like, hey, would you like to come to PwC and build a pen testing practice in the Midwest for PwC? And I was like, well, I just built a small practice at an MSP. Let's take my ideas on how I think pen testing should be done from a business practice perspective, and let's apply them to a Big Four firm. And so I knew that was a key important experience, was to take the ideas I had and see if I could apply them universally across, see if they'd be acceptable to a large client set that you've got with an organization like PwC. And that went really, really well. And I ended up leading a lot of incident, threat management, threat hunting, pen testing engagements with PwC. And then the opportunity came along, and it's so funny. I tell this story, right? I've been doing all this work, and the partner for PwC calls me up one day and is like, "Hey, you did some IR work, security operations work for the military while you were in." And I was like, I mean, tangentially, as if two things were like moving in parallel with each other, kind of, sort of. And they're like, cool, put it on a piece of paper and come meet the CISO at Abbott. And I was like, why? And they're like, because we got an opportunity to do a SOC transformation project up here, and we think you'd be a great leader for that. And I was like, well, you don't ever hear anybody with a track that goes from director of red team, director of pen testing to CISO. I was like, this is that role that gets you that next role. And so I took a leap of faith and had confidence in my knowledge and my skill set and everything that I had built up until that point, and went in and just had faith in my own capabilities to build a security team, having never done it before in my life, doing it for Fortune 100 at the time, reporting directly to the CISO, and it ended up being successful. 3 years there. I wanted to see if I could do it again. So when Paulo, who was the CISO at the time at Mondelez, was like, hey, come over and be my battle buddy over at Mondelez post WannaCry and come help me revamp the security team here at Mondelez, I was like, well, I did it here. Let's prove that I can do it here again and build a security program over here. And I did it over there with a third of the budget and a third of the time. And I was like, okay, I can do this. And so, like, from that point forward, that was kind of where I knew, like, okay, everything I had done leading up to that had prepared me. I'd strategized, I'd had a goal, I'd hit those milestones, I'd looked for jobs that gave me those opportunities. And when I got to the end of those milestones, it was just kind of like more of that checkbox. Like, okay, you are ready for this. You are ready for this. Let's go find you a job that can prove that you can do this.
That's awesome. Talk about, you need your name changed to Mr. Transformation instead of Mr. Awesome. Can we change that now? Mr. Transformation. And he should have that on a t-shirt too. You do say that a lot. I said it recently in a text, and I was like, yeah, transformation is a word for it. Sure.
Yeah, you need swag. Transformation swag coming.
Yeah, it sounds like such a pretty word, but the actual process of transformation is extremely challenging. And you have to have the right leadership in place, and you've got to engage the team appropriately, where individuals are knowing and they're up to date about trends, but security measures, compliance internally. And so you've been able to successfully do that multiple times because you have the track record that's been able to prove that has led you into where you're at today. And you're known for building teams. It's your background. For the leaders that are listening, and when I say leaders, I'm talking about people that are leading people. These could be junior managers or just general leads, all the way up to, say, executives, because I think the advice you would give would probably be across the board for them on what could they do to better engage their teams for a transformation, to get them connected and to understand how to better engage in overall security, to increase the overall business impact, how to engage the compliance team, how to stay up to date with trends and manage threats and prioritize things and all of that. What would you tell these leaders?
So I think you hit something that I think is really important to really highlight about transformation, right? Is that transformation is hard. We had this kind of saying at Abbott, right? And I kind of go back to that because in 2016, when we started there, right, they had never had a CISO before. They'd never had a security organization that reported up to a CISO before. And so we used to always lament the CISO, the chief architect, and myself would always lament over dinner and drinks. Like it was like, a patient. In this case, Abbott was 125 years old. And we are the new blood. We're the new heart. We're the new liver. We're the new organ. And we're coming into a body that has been running for 125 years and it's been successful, right? I mean, they're a multi-billion-dollar organization, 50 plus, 100 plus billion dollars. I don't know what their market cap is now. There's definitely a boomer mentality, right? Which is like, I've been doing just fine by myself without you. Why do I need you? And I think the biggest thing for any leader that is trying to be transformative is to realize that you're the odd person out and that you have to be flexible. You have to be malleable. You have to be the one that sacrifices. You have to be the one that bends the knee in a lot of cases because you have to adapt to the new body as much as the new body has to adapt to you. And that may seem like, I can tell you, like, when we talk to cybersecurity folks all the time, and I was like this, like in 2013 when I got out, and I was like, no, Fidelity, you must care about APTs. I don't care what you think. I just got left the military. I'd seen some intelligence. I was like, APT is the biggest threat to the entire world. And I go back to like, oh, just patch your stuff, just have a good password, just have MFA. And you realize quickly that, like, man, that stuff's just not, that's just not real to have that expectation of any business, let alone a business that's been in place for 125 years, right? And so flexibility, empathy, understanding that you're new in both in role and in ideas and concepts and things that you want to do, and it's going to take every ounce of partnership and cooperation that you can muster to get somebody to agree to something that you said in a meeting, let alone implementing a tool, pushing a policy, changing an entire ecosystem. And the sooner you realize that, the better off I think you're going to be as a leader and the more successful you're going to be as a leader, because it truly is a lead by influence in a transformation type of environment. I say this to my veteran transitioners all the time, like, gone are the days that you could point to somebody and be like, do this or else you're gonna get an Article 15, right? Like, or an LOC or an LOR, right? That's like, those days just don't happen on the outside. And so you've got to lead through influence.
Yeah, and something you told me, I think I want to share here, is you told me one time, you said, do you want to win or do you want to be right?
Yes, I want to credit that appropriately. That's Joel Fulton's statement. He's former CISO at Splunk. We had him on cyber and security, and that was a key statement that he made, right? And as a CISO, regardless, like, you senior leader, junior leader, whatever the case is, right? That's an important distinction. Do you want to be right or do you want to win? And that could fundamentally change your working relationship with your peers, your working relationship with your boss, your working relationship with your stakeholders. It could definitively change whether you stay there for 12 months, 24 months, 36 months, or 10 years at an organization, right? And you hear people say picking and choosing your battles is super important. That's really what we're talking about, is like, do you want to die on a sword for, a password on a mainframe that's 30 years old, that's protected behind 50 layers of firewalls and a network segment with 2 allowable IP addresses and one person that can only log in through physical access? Is that really the hill you want to die on? Or do you want to die on the MFA hill, right, for all the external access stuff? And really, you gotta pick and choose those battles.
Yeah, you got to prioritize. And I think sometimes we got to check the ego too, right? Like,
oh yeah,
with that quote, that's what sticks out is, hey, we don't always have to be right. I think we have to seek to understand. And it's not that we're trying to find the path of least resistance, but to your point, we gotta pick the battles, right? Which ones are the ones worth fighting? Where are our largest risk areas, and where can we make the most impact? And then from there, it's incremental, right? Like, just it's a give and take motion. What you were talking about, I think that was a really good analogy about, like, the body's also adjusting. You're adjusting to the body, right? It's like a twofold relationship. So both sides have to give a little bit, and I think it's a longer journey that a lot of people realize in transformation.
It's weird to think about a CISO's lifespan, if you will, inside of an organization. When you think about the typical 3-year track that most CISOs spend in an organization, it's sad the reasons why it's only 3 years, but that also explains why in a 3-year track, there's only a handful of things that you can truly get accomplished. You might get, if there was no EDR, you might get EDR pushed. If you had no SIM, you might get a SIM push, right? If you had no MFA, you might get an MFA push. Like in a 3-year time period, you'd be surprised at the 1 or 2 things that you might actually realistically get accomplished as a CISO. And I think that floors a lot of people.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you come in with like lofty goals, a big agenda, right? You're pitching your strategy, and it's like, all right, there's resistance. So yeah, I think it's challenging. The more we unpack this, I mean, I hope that people, if you work in an organization, you're starting to really understand some of the challenges that your leadership faces day in and day out. It's not as easy as just snapping your fingers, giving direction and saying this is what the organization is going to do. There's a lot more to that. But I'm going to pivot a little bit here and talk about GRC automation. So the market is booming with all of these automation vendors. GRC tools are coming left and right. Everyone's claiming to streamline audits, leverage efficiencies. Everything is, the hottest new thing. What are you seeing in terms of the space that's actually working? And then second part to that is, what are you still looking for in terms of the GRC automation tooling?
So I take it this is in regards to the LinkedIn post that I made here recently.
That caught my attention. I'm like, this is really relevant to my day-to-day, what I hear my customers talking about, what my peers in this space were like, hey, what are you seeing in all the tools, right? There's so many flavors of this, and they all have a different spin on dashboarding or reporting. And I'm just, I'm really curious to kind of unpack that with you and see what you think.
Yeah. So lots of thoughts here. And this is I've been at Query since 22. So this is my second year doing this. And I made a similar post last year, right? I want to, let's put this in a box really fast, because I want to tell a backstory, because I think it's important to the relevancy of like this journey that I've had. I mentioned Mondelez getting asked by the CISO there to kind of come and transform the security organization with a third of the budget, and a third of the time. And I shit you not, right? I mean, I had a $30 million budget for my security operations team at Abbott at the time, and he literally wanted me to come do it with less than 10 at Mondelez. And he wanted, it took me 3 years to do it at Abbott, and he literally wanted me to transform it in a year, right? And so it was literally a third and a third.
Third and a third for sure.
Yeah, a third and a third for sure. And so with those limitations in mind, I admit it, and we joked about this when I was at Abbott, we had healthcare money. I wanted Splunk, dude. I went out and wrote Splunk a check, right? I wanted Carbon Black for EDR. I went out and wrote Carbon Black a check, right? I mean, I had healthcare money, and I made no shame about having healthcare money. When I went to Mondelez, I had consumer retail money, which is basically saying I have monopoly money to kind of contend with, right? And so I learned a new value in terms of looking for vendors that were hungry. And so when I went for a SOAR vendor, instead of picking a mainline vendor like Phantom, or Demisto or something like that, I went to the startup space, and I was like, okay, who's doing cool stuff in the startup space? And I picked up Simplify, because they were brand new in the space. This was long before Google ever bought them, right? And so it really opened my eye up to, the fact that, and this is as much of, how I see Query as a startup. One of the reasons why I love working at startups is they are hungry for relevance on a lot of different terms. They have an idea that they can make a product better. They have an idea that they can make the mousetrap better. They have an idea that they can make the marketplace better. And sometimes those ideas are shit, and sometimes those ideas are great. It really just kind of, it all depends on the market and the product. But what I found was it was actually worth my time as a security leader to seek those startups out and to be like, hey, what are you doing that's different in this space versus your competitors? So fast forward, when I started at Query, they had already, and I'm not going to name any names because it's we'll just keep it kind of above board. They had already acquired one of these compliance automation vendors. And it was my first time doing it. I was an old PwC guy. I was used to doing all my audits on spreadsheets. I was a QSA. I did all my PCI DSS stuff on spreadsheets, right? And so it was the first time being exposed to a SaaS platform that allowed me to from a security operations perspective, security team perspective, be able to automate my entire compliance. And I thought it was cool as shit. I'm not going to lie. I was like, yes, because when I went into Query, I was like, I'm going to have to write every single policy. I'm going to have to do it all by hand. I'm going to have to go find a framework online and download it and implement this. I'm going to have to build this entire, the fundamentals that you think about when you build a security program. I have to build all that from scratch. And so having a platform like that, knowing that market space existed, was massive for me. It was great, especially in the startup space. 2 years later, as I look back on my 2 years of experience with this, I have questions about its viability as you go up into the larger organizations. And I do look back at my days at Abbott and Mondelez, and I look back at my days at PwC and when I was doing, a lot of assessments and stuff like that. And I do question whether a platform like that has viability in a lot of the larger enterprise perspectives. And a lot of the folks that I've talked to through the course of this journey, they've talked about having large enterprise customers, but then you dive deep into like what their large enterprise customers are doing. And it's like 1 or 2 GRC analysts who use it for like 2 or 3 parts of the entire process. And they're really not even utilizing the full capability of it. Right. There's a lot of the GRC automation stuff where they do API checks, right, with the technologies, and their logic on their SaaS application is really just to provide me, who looks at the application, a checkbox that says, yeah, you've got this piece of control that's in place. But you know what I still get? I've done 2 SOC 2s now. I've done a type 1 and a type 2. My auditors still come through and say, hey, listen, I need an evidence request. And I'm like, isn't this the reason why I have a platform like this, is so that you can pull the evidence out of that? And they're like, yeah, but all they really tell us, all they really do is they give us a checkbox that says you've got it, but we really need to understand, like, are you really doing it? How's it really done? Right. And so like, I think that there's, I think that this is still a space that is still new enough that there's opportunities for innovation. So this is the second year in a row that I've made a post like this, where I've gone out to the marketplace and I've pleaded with the market, with my peers, to say, hey, tell me what you're using out there, because like I still see this space as being super immature. There are things that are missing. And so like I can tell you that just recently, this is very recent stuff, like as I talked to probably 50 vendors in the last 30 days since I made that post, just to kind of see what's in the marketplace. I've seen, of those 50 vendors, 75% of them are doing what everybody else is doing, which is typical API checks, give me a green box. And it looks great. For me as a startup, there's going to be some cynical stuff. You might want to get ready to edit some stuff out, because there's about to be some mud being flown here.
Speak your truth.
Let's do it. Yeah.
I learned something as I was talking with one vendor in particular, and if they hear this, they'll know who they are. And I had suspected that this was the case after about a year of dealing with these vendors in this case, but hearing it kind of solidified it. Audits are expensive. I mean, it's hundreds of hours for a good SOC 2 type 2 audit. Hundreds of hours. There are auditors out there that will literally give you a type 2 in less than 40 hours worth of work. And the reason that they do it is because they have platforms like this where they can go in as an auditor and see that there's a bunch of green check boxes and be like, cool, here's our type 2 format. Here's your report. Go forth. Have a nice day. Thanks for your money. We're out. And that, like I said, it was disappointing to hear. I had suspected it when I started to see this marketplace unfold, and to hear it disappointed me significantly.
Well, and someone that spent their prior life in audit, right? You know what goes into a work stream. I mean, writing a ROC, right? Like, would you have relied on check marks? You would have probably also asked for additional evidence. And if there's an API, right, how do you get assurance that API is pulling complete and accurate information? Yes. I mean, you even as the CISO, right, like utilizing this and seeing it from the flip side, not just the auditor perspective. If you're pulling, let's say, an inventory of assets, like there probably is some checks and balances to make sure, hey, is it pulling all of the relevant assets in scope? Are the things that are kind of like getting missed I can't just fully rely on this tooling to give me everything. I mean, we're not doing our due diligence if we're just relying on it.
So that came up really really abruptly in this year's search versus last year's, because, and this is what I explained to the folks that I talked to, is like, when I started at Query, we had just gotten our Series A. We knew that we needed to be SOC 2 Type 1. We were still kind of in ideation and in go-to-market strategy at Query. And so our risk tolerance was imaginably pretty high. I mean, that was a conscious business decision for where we were at as a startup. As we've gotten clients, as we've matured as an organization, as we've matured our product, as we start to do more TPRM forms, right, all that stuff, our maturity starts to increase. I've noticed that as our maturity increases, my expectations out of a tool like that have also changed to mature with my expectations of risk management inside a Query. And that's where I've really started to see that a lot of these tools are very 1 inch deep. They're 100 miles wide, but to the API point, they're just pulling like 1 or 2 data points to see there. And I'm like, well, hold on for a second. Like, if I've got a vulnerability over here and I'm going to risk accept it and it's already in your tool, why can't I have a workflow that allows me to hit a couple checkboxes and move this to my risk register and document why I'm accepting these vulnerabilities? And by the way, here's the signature of the CEO and the CTO that says that we've all risk accepted this. And so like one of the things that I still find is missing, and I hate to compare it to Archer, because I've done an Archer deployment, and God, that's miserable. Like, you need a $1 billion
Yes.
and like 400 freaking engineers to do an Archer deployment. And so, like, I'm not asking for Archer, but I am saying that if I'm already giving you access to stuff via the API, the best you could do is like make my workflows better. And a lot of these tools just aren't even doing that for me.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I remember the first days. I mean, like a decade ago, Archer deployments, and the infancy of what that used to be. And then I think of like how much we've matured with some of these larger organizations, right? And I've even seen organizations utilize the ServiceNows, the Jiras, a lot of these, and they make their own GRC type platform in ways that like it works for their system, but it's so highly customized, right?
Yeah.
And so now seeing these smaller companies coming in and doing the tooling function, I'm kind of just waiting for somebody to make the auditors' lives easier,
Yeah.
right? I'm like, how cool would it be to streamline the way that we write a ROC, right?
Yeah.
Like, the reporting aspect of it is so time sensitive. Like, it's the 40 hours that you brought up. I mean, that makes me cringe. Because I know what goes into these SOC audits.
Yeah.
I know that, the documentation, like you said, even that space, like, we still a lot of times live out of Excel sheets. Like, yes, there are things that have evolved, but I mean, very much of the audit space is not, caught up in terms of where technology is heading. So like, yes, we've made reporting and dashboards a little bit prettier and a little bit more meaningful. But then there's also levels of assurance in bigger bodies that we report to and we have to maintain compliance with. Because if we get audited, we need to be able to, as auditors, meet the mark there. So I think there's a lot more to come in this space. It's one that I'm obviously watching really closely. I would love to have a follow-up conversation on this in like a year's time when you're starting your search again.
Yeah, for sure. And I can tell you that I've secured a replacement for my current vendor, and again, like it worked out, the same way that I worked out when I was at Mondelez. Like, I found an early stage startup company that's just coming out of stealth, and I spent some time with them. And if you've ever seen me on Cyber Insecurity, if you ever talked to me, you know that I'm very cynical on AI. Even when we started talking about like, what are we going to do with AI to put AI in our product, I was like, dear God, please don't do anything cheesy or stupid with AI. Like, because I think that there's just so much stupid shit out there with AI right now. And so like, I'll give you a hint to a LinkedIn post that I'm going to make. I don't know when this will air versus that LinkedIn post, but the first conversation I had with the CEO of this company, she led with like blah 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 AI, like within the first 2 seconds of the conversation with me. And I was like, let me stop you right there, because if you're going to lead with AI, this conversation is not going to go very well. Like, please don't tell me you're doing some stupid stuff with AI. And after spending probably 5 hours with the product and seeing like what it's capable of, and seeing that they are actually being responsible with AI, I think that there are some innovators out there that are moving in a way that I think it's still focused. I'm sorry for you as an auditor. It's still focused on me, the security owner, right? In terms of making my life and responding to your audits faster, in terms of gathering evidence and sort of having management replies for your questions and things like that. I think it's still very much focused on me, not you. But I can at least see that there are some people that are making efforts to having a more active role in how we handle automated risk management. And I say that loosely because I don't think you can automate risk management. I fundamentally don't believe that. But I think that you can at least automate some of the tedious tasks that are associated with gathering evidence, with having management replies, with hey, you've got a control that's out of whack. Your policy says this. You're 5 days over your user access review. I highly recommend that you write an exception or you write a risk entry in your risk register that says why you're 5 days over on your user access review. I think those types of workflows, I think, is what's missing in a lot of tools. Is like, hey, you want me to make your job easier, Mr. Auditor, Mrs. Auditor, whatever the case is, give me a way that makes my workflow easier so that if I miss a user access review, you're going to see it and I'm going to be like, cool, but my tool actually helped me write a compensating control or a risk register entry for it or whatever the case is, and here's all the data to support it.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because that back and forth, it'll happen every single year with whatever audit firm you're using, and it's a time suck. But to your point, it's like, how do we delegate to tooling or whatever it may be what we don't need human elements for, so that it frees up your time to focus on the bigger stuff.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I love that. This has been such an insightful and fun conversation. We could definitely keep going on and on and on, but for the sake of time, we like to keep our episodes bite-sized and digestible. So, Mr. Awesome, you have been awesome. We have thoroughly enjoyed this episode. Oh man, we're gonna have to have you back on. You're just gonna become like a repeat guest. And if you haven't checked out Neal's show, click all the links below, please. You're doing all the good things in this community, and we so appreciate it.
I appreciate you, and I will come back anytime. I'll never say no to you or Jax, and you two are role models in this, and I truly do appreciate you.
We love you. Thanks, Neal.
Yes. All right.
Could have just kept on going.
I know.
We had like other questions.
Oh, we
actually
didn't cover those. No.
But it was too good to like move it faster. So I was glad we spent some quality time on everything, and I thought it was great. Yes, we're gonna have to have a part 2. Done.
Absolutely.
Season 6. What do you guys think? Simply Cyber Season 6. Neal, come back. And what do you guys feel about the longer stream with him? Probably a yes from everybody.
Yeah. Worth the extra minutes for sure.
Yes.
Well, guys, thanks for tuning in to another show on Two Cyber Chicks. As always, hit like, subscribe, share with your community. Check out the Simply Cyber channel. Check out all the goodness that Dr. Jerry is pushing out. We are so blessed to have you come and hang out with us, and we will catch you on